This is a special program note. Simple Analytics has been gracious enough to offer a special discount to listeners of the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast audience. They are offering a discount on an annual plan of Simple Analytics. So just go to simpleanalytics.com/Data Diva. The offer is a annual subscription of Simple Analytics for $75 per year, which is a discount. The regular price is $108 per year, and this offer locks people into that rate in following years. So take advantage of this discount. Is a great offer, and many thanks to Simple Analytics. Personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest from one of my favorite cities in the world, Amsterdam. I have Adriaan van Rossum, who's the founder and CEO of Simple Analytics. Hello.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, this is great. I'm glad we were able to connect. You and I, we connected on LinkedIn. I think we were doing a joint. We were both speaking, I think, at an event in the US, a Rise of Privacy Tech. And you contacted me and you're like, hey, we're both going to be at this event. We should talk. And you sent me some information about your product. And I thought, I love what you're doing. I love your privacy focus. And I thought this would be, a great way for us to get to know each other and have my audience get to know you. Well, first of all, tell me a bit about you and your journey into privacy, and then a bit about Simple Analytics.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, so the journey started when I was fairly young, I would say. Now I'm 32, still not very old, I would say, but and it was like when I was in high school, and there was this. I was just interested in building websites and doing all this kind of stuff. And in the early days, there was like so many different ways that you could connect websites with browsers. And in that time you had like Internet Explorer 6, for example. And that was like a very, how would you say it? Like it was a very premature browser at that time. And what you can do is you could do like very weird stuff. So if people would visit your website, you would be able to get their clipboard, for example. Nowadays that wouldn't be like a part of any browser feature, but it's something that wasn't really thought of. And I started playing with that, and I realized like, hey, this is very privacy invasive of a feature of a browser, right? Like, and everyone can access the data of others now. So there was, I think, the first moment where I started to realize like what the capabilities of websites are, and what you can do as a webmaster or as a website builder. From that moment on, privacy got more important for me, and it always kept an interest. And then at some point, I was installing Google Analytics for some clients. I was working as a freelancer then, and it didn't feel right. Like I really wanted to do something else than feeding all the data of their visitors also to Google Analytics. And we know like they use it for other purposes than just showing you the analytics, right? So I thought like, okay, I need to do something about this. And I talked with my girlfriend about it, and she said like, why don't you build something yourself? And I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. So I started building Simple Analytics. I think it was 4 years ago. And since then, it has been super fun to work on something that's your passion. And at the same time, you're doing something that's, a little bit better for the world. So that's how it started. And that's, still what a mission is. And really love to work on this.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. I think, right now, I guess people are really focused on analytics right now because of this Google. There was a ruling in the EU around Google Analytics, and there's kind of talk, a lot of talk in the EU around sort of cookies and how websites work. And there's an IAB Europe case going on in Europe right now. So there's a lot of focus in Europe right now on websites and how they collect data. And I think people in the US, they're watching this very closely because this may impact the way they do business. But one thing that's really interesting, I decided many moons ago to become a webmaster because I was interested in how websites work. I was interested in how the internet worked, how I wanted to know how the data flowed. And some of the stuff that I found out, I was horrified. I just
It's
couldn't
awesome that you
believe.
did that. Awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't
So what did
believe.
you find out?
Oh my God, just how people can manipulate data, and how the data flow. You think, okay, I just add data here, it is only there. It's like, oh no, it flows to other places. It's been scraped. Data about you has been scraped from other places on the internet. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But one of the things that I found out, and this is something that you had sort of alluded to, and that people don't really understand, and I hope because of some of these cases that are going on, they're understanding. There's a lot of like passive data collection that happens, right? So it's like you put data on the internet, and then you think, if you're a webmaster or you're, someone who's updating data on the internet, you're not understanding the tools that you may be integrating into your website, maybe collecting and selling data that you didn't intend for it to do that, but that is exactly what it's doing. So tell
Mm,
me a little bit about that part of the internet.
yeah, yeah. It's also very hard to make sure that there's no data going somewhere else. Like, it's very difficult to know. Like, okay, we use this service now, um, and we want to find out what services they use. But that's very hard to do. Like in Europe, you have now the privacy policy, which kind of states it a bit, but it doesn't have to go in detail. So you don't really know which other businesses are using your data as well. So it's very not transparent as it should be. So it's very hard for someone to make a decision like, okay, this is a product where the data will stay in the product and not so much go somewhere else. And it's simple. We of course care a lot about that because we want to have our data within the Netherlands, or at least in Europe, and that's an important factor for us. But also for us, it's super difficult to find the right tools to make that happen. But it is possible. Like, you can always find like a European alternative, but it's not the same as like having this number one product where you're used to, for example, right? Like, for example, use Google Docs or something like that. There's not a great alternative for that. So it's very hard for a lot of businesses to, first of all, find a solution that's different and that's like, for example, better privacy wise. But then you also have to do a little bit of a step back currently for how the UI will work and how fast you will be with the software. So what I really hope for is that in the near future, more and more products or more and more builders or makers will understand this problem, and that there will be more solutions within Europe, and also like hopefully with payments from the European government as well to make this happen, because it's very hard to see where the data is going through. So yeah, we better build something that's privacy wise a good solution.
You're familiar with this Google Analytics case, I'm sure, that's going on in Europe right now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
people don't really understand. People don't really understand what this case is about and what it sort of means. For the audience, give them kind of a simple version of what's happening with this case and sort of what they need to be thinking about as a result of it.
Yeah. We also recently, my partner wrote a blog post about it, so maybe that's nice for in the show notes, where it is in detail explained what exactly happened in this case. So we'll go through it not so thoroughly, but for people that want to, then they can do that. The Australian equivalent of the Data Protection Authority, they got a complaint from someone on a website of a healthcare website, and the complaint was that the data was being shared with American servers. And since 2020, we have the so-called Schrems 2, which makes that like illegal. So you don't want to send data of your customers to US servers. Before that, we had like a data protection shield, which was awesome. But now that shield is gone. So basically, EU says like don't send sensitive or personal data to US servers. So what they found out was that a website was doing this. So they were sending data to Google Analytics, and Google Analytics, their servers are from Google, so also in the US. What was the problem here is that they were thinking they were safe, as in they were anonymizing the IP addresses. And it feels like anonymizing IP addresses is something that isn't personal data anymore, right? Because it's not linked to one person, but maybe to a group of persons. But what they now said is that that is personal identifiable information. So they say like, even if you anonymize the IP address, you're still in trouble. You still can't do that. So then there's no solution within Google Analytics that I know of, and that it would make sense to still be able to run it in the EU. So that's basically the thing. So the IP address is anonymized, but it's not anonymized. It's still personal data. So therefore, it's still not allowed to use that in the EU. And this is not like final yet. So it's still also in the Netherlands. We're still talking about it. It's not final yet. So it's not forbidden just yet, but it can happen that it will be forbidden in the near future. And that's where a lot of people are looking for different solutions. And yeah, we see that as well. Like there's so much more traction on our product because people, are kind of scared. Like, oh, I don't want to have some bad privacy case on my business. So let's better get it fixed.
So the issue is the data transfer, right, without sort of knowledge and consent of the individual. And a lot of times I think, you remember this. So you're someone who built websites in the past. Building websites now is much different, where a lot of things are baked in. So I remember when you used to have to go out and get a Google Analytics ID, and then you had to add it to a website and stuff. And like now you don't have to do that because it's already in there.
Yeah, it's usually just a tick of a box and like, hey, fill in your ID here. Funny enough, like I did a test a few weeks ago with installing Google Analytics. I still think it's fairly complex, as in like just getting that ID parameter that you use in different tools, or getting the script tag to install in your website if you are a developer. It's not easy, I would say, but a lot of integrations are there, right? So if you're using WordPress, it's just a click of a button and you install the Google Analytics plugin and you're done. So that's an advantage. Like there's a lot of tooling around Google Analytics. And that's something that is always the problem with like being the biggest, right? And you have the most tooling. But still, it's I think a fairly complex product. So.
Right, exactly. People want to be on the internet, and they want to have, obviously businesses or other people from other places looking at their stuff, but then they have to make sure that their website is compliant, like within their country, about how to transfer data. Another case, I don't want to pick on Google, but this is about fonts.
Yeah.
I had talked with another guest on the podcast about the fonts. And it's funny because we were talking about fonts before this case came out. So talk to me, explain what the issue is about fonts. So that this case is about Google fonts, but fonts in general can be problematic if they're not embedded, right? So explain what this problem is. I know a lot of people don't understand it about fonts on websites.
Yeah, so fonts is it feels like it's something that's it's not bad, right? Like it's just a font, like it doesn't do anything on your website, just makes it more beautiful, right? But the thing is, you're sending a request to some other server to load the fonts in, and that's something that can be abused. It also cannot be abused, right? Like if I host a website and I say like, here, this is a font I created, everyone is allowed to visit it. Just use it whatever you want, that's fine. But if it's not the case, and I don't know about this specific case with Google, why it's a bad thing. I can look it up later, but it's more like you're sending data to a different website when you embed fonts. So that's in a nutshell it is. So you're getting data from a different website, and that's not yours. So you're sending also your visitors' IP address and stuff about your visitors to that website. And it depends on the website what they do with it.
Right. And it's not just a Google issue because, Adobe has font, there are a lot of fonts, right, that people can use. So I think the issue is having, I guess, that library installed in a way that your website doesn't have to call a separate location, you know what I'm saying, for the font. It has to be installed or either on your website or installed someplace more locally related. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's fairly easy to download a font and install it on your own website, and then you're bypassing the whole problem of sharing the IP addresses to Google. And I think that was what the case is about. The decision in the German court was like you're sending IP addresses to Google without authorization or legitimate reasons to do so. So that's the problem. So you probably want to download the fonts, and also the Google fonts you usually can just download. It's a click of a button, you download the fonts, and there's enough tutorials online where you can search for like, hey, how to embed your own font on your website, and then you have solved that problem. So yeah, it takes a little bit more effort, but privacy wise, it's way better.
Yeah. What I noticed over the years, and this is around the time that GDPR became a law and it started into enforcement. So say 2016 or 2018, I noticed that some of these tools, like Google Analytics, they were transferring more of the responsibility over to the user, like to the webmaster and stuff. And so I was concerned about that because I'm like, people don't even know exactly what they're doing. So I've heard a lot of people say, well, I'm compliant with the GDPR because I use Google. I'm like, well, that's not their responsibility. That's kind of your responsibility. But I think a lot of people didn't understand that. They think, okay, if I use like a major tool, I'm compliant. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a good thing that you bring this up. Google is definitely walking away from responsibility here, right? Like they build this tool and they say like, oh, it's your responsibility how to use it. But at the same time, they have many users from the EU and also from California and different places where privacy laws are in place. And then it is their responsibility, right? Like they have a responsibility to their users to at least inform them and make tools around it to make it easy for them. And they did a bare minimum of what was required. So they did the IP anonymization. That was a feature. It was a big thing for them. Like, oh, this is probably okay. Now, today or a few weeks ago, we found out it's not okay. It's not enough. So yeah, they have been walking away from a mess that they created since a long time. And I really empathize with John from Vivaldi, the browser, the episode you had with him. And I think we can agree a lot on like how Google is in this landscape and how much of responsibility it takes, and it's way too little.
So tell me about where your tool comes in. So it's actually prime time for you and your tool and tools like it. Because I think people are thinking, I think for the most part, people are like, okay, I just want to do business. Like, I don't want to be in a fight with the EU about different things. And people don't know what to do. So I feel like some people, they're like, okay, well, I'll keep Google Analytics, but I don't know exactly how to change what I'm doing, right? Because, a lot of people, they've kind of built all these workflows on top of this, and they don't know how to sort of get through it or whatever. But as an alternative, talk about how your tool is different.
Yeah, so the first thing is basically the cookies, right? Like it's an important subject for a long time now. And that's the major part of why Simple Analytics is different from Google Analytics. So we don't use cookies, but also cookies is not just a cookie on your browser. It's like everything that is used to track a visitor. So it's basically a term for everything that you do around tracking visitors. So if you have an anonymous IP address and you still track people, that's still somewhat a cookie. If you're having some storage in your browser that's not a cookie, it's still legally a cookie. It's not like defined like that because the GDPR wants to be very broad on how they define those things. But that's one thing that that, for example, in the UK, there you have Packer, that's a version of GDPR. They are way more clear on like what is a cookie and what is not. So if people want to know, like, okay, I want to know more about like what is included in that, Packer is really a really good resource for that. But that's a big difference with Simple Analytics and Google Analytics. So we don't use cookies, we don't track people at all. And then the next thing is like there's kind of a mind shift needed or required at least. Well, because if you think about like all the things that you use in Google Analytics, like this, if you really think about it, it's maybe 1% that you use. Like you want to know how many visitors, you want to know where is this spike coming from, you want to know how is my newsletter performing, stuff like that. So that's stuff you want to know, but there's so much more in Google Analytics. And I think for a lot of people, we should ask ourselves, like, do we really need all that type of information? Like recently I spoke to not a customer, but to a person that said like, hey, we have a business here and we don't use analytics. And the business was doing great. And that's also something that, yeah, would be really really good to think about, right? Like, what is the data that you really need? How can I run my business? Instead of doing it the other way around, like gathering all the data you need or don't need, and then you ask yourself later, did we really need this data, or what is the question we're gonna question on this data? So I think we need a mind shift to change into thinking what we actually need in data. So that's why I think Google Analytics is way too much for most people. Like there's way too much. So that's also a reason why Simple Analytics is a great alternative, because you're only getting the needed information. So you get the page views, you get how long people are in your on your pages, stuff like that. You can see where people are coming from. Is your newsletter performing well? And stuff like that. So you can still get all the insights that most people need, and that's usually enough for most people, and that's something that we should realize. And then on top, the last difference is and we heard that quite a bit now, is Google Analytics is not free, right? So it sounds free, but yeah, we all know it's not free. Like you're still paying with the privacy of your visitors and of yourself. So you could say, like, how can we fix that privacy issue? Well, at first, you probably, if you want to have analytics, you need to pay for it. Otherwise, you'll pay in a different way. And I think that's where the EU does a great job. and they're far from where they need to be. But the EU tries to protect the visitors of those websites, and I think that's a great place to start. And we try to help with that mission as much as possible.
You hit on something really interesting. I would love to explore this a bit more. And you're talking about, tools that are free, right? What happens, and I wish that there was something, I don't know, in law or something where they can sort of change this. So the loophole is when you use a service or something and it's free, there's a value exchange there that happens, right? So the problem with the free tool is that the value exchange tends to be like very asymmetrical, and it's not as beneficial to the individual. So like let's say percentage wise, let's say you sign up for a free tool, maybe it benefits you 20%, but the tool that you're using for free may benefit from you like 1,000%. I think that when you have something, and I've run through this recently where I had something that I was using, and I thought, I'm really not comfortable with the asymmetrical nature of this exchange, right? So I decided to go to something that I paid for, where it's like, okay, this is because I'm paying for this tool, it sort of evens the playing field a bit. Obviously, the company, you're going to make profit and stuff like that, but it's more even. It's more of an even exchange, I feel. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, I'm saying it from a person that makes money on this, right? So the visitors or the listeners should know that. But at the same time, I really believe that if there's indeed this percentage difference, right, like 100 or 1,000%, for example, you have, I read a calculation of, I think it was a few years ago already, but that if Facebook would charge people, they should charge people $7 a year. And then they would have as much profit as they would now with their ad business. So they would charge everybody $7. And then you think like, yeah, but nobody is giving Facebook $7. Maybe 1% of their customer base will do it. And 1% is maybe high even. So then everybody leaves the platform and the platform dies, right? So there's this thing with like free software or free products. It's very, very hard to get like the majority of people or a very big portion of people without charging them for it. At the same time, it's very difficult to make them pay for it. So what do you do? And I think like there's a very good a moment right now where more and more people think like, oh, but if I charge and I have a smaller group of people, that's also great. Like you see a lot of things like Substack, and you see a lot of like independent makers and so many creators that are working on something and selling it directly to their fans, basically. And I think that's a very great way to start it. And then I think we will have way more smaller companies, and I think that's great, because if you have like one massive company, there's a lot of power to be abused, right? So I think we're going in the right direction here, where there are many different and small companies, and then we are finally at some point where one company can't say like, oh, we're abusing the law or abusing our power, and that's okay, and then the next company will do the same. So I think we're on track to something really great if this goes in that direction.
What else is happening kind of in the world of technology or privacy that's concerning you right now, in terms of if you're thinking about the future, right? So I like to talk to people like you who are developing tools, because I feel like you're really kind of future focused, right? Where we sort of need to go. So what's happening right now that's concerning you?
I think what is concerning me is that the power is moving a bit to browsers. and especially the Google Chrome browser. And that's in the beginning, it was a great thing. Like they developed a very fast browser, did some very great things technology-wise, and it was great all along. And then now the whole landscape of browsers is basically based off that one browser. So Google Chrome is created by an open source version, and open source version is called Chromium. And now almost all browsers are built with that version, with Chromium. And what Google now is doing is they start adding, they say, privacy features into their browser, but it's Google. So there you always have to think twice if they say something regarding privacy. And this time it's no different. Like they got a lot of back pressure, or how do you say that? From Flock, for example. So building profiles in the browser, so they didn't have to track people. At the same time, you're tracking people in the browser. So you're just moving the whole problem into something else and then say, we don't track you. So it's a terrible power move of Google to do that. At the same time, like I think it was 4 years ago when I started my company, there was also this new Google version that had like the login icon on the top right corner, right? So there's this little avatar, and then you're logged into the browser. And that was like, at that point, I thought like, okay, this is going too far. And at the time they said like, yeah, but we're not going to use this to log you in on different sites, just for Google services. Until now. And now they use it for multiple stuff, including tracking. And then it's like, oh, but you say the thing to like have the privacy landscape accept you, and then later you do something else. And that's what they did. That's what WhatsApp is doing. There's so many businesses that do that. So it's very hard to believe those businesses. And I think the only solution for that is to break them up in smaller pieces, or to shut the practice down. And for example, don't allow them in the EU or in other privacy-aware countries or places. And then they need to change. So I definitely think there needs to be a law for those businesses to really fix the privacy issue.
Do you think there will be a change? Do you think as a result of this litigation that Google is going to make any changes here?
I think they will do the bare minimum that's required for this. And it will be, it's hard to say what they will do, but their history shows that they are not really going to fix the problem, because their business model is built around tracking. So they're not gonna say tomorrow or next week like, hey, you know what, we did something bad in the last few years, we're gonna solve it now for once and for good, and we're gonna do it like this. We don't track anybody more anymore, and sorry to our shareholders, but the company will devaluate quite a bit. That's not what they can do, right? Like the shareholders will be very mad, and people will be replaced, and they will keep doing what they will do. I don't really think that will solve an issue. I do think that with legislation you can change them a bit, but at the same time, in their like balance sheets or yearly reports, they already have like a budget for fines, right? So it's just part of their business model to pay a few fines, and you can continue doing what you do. So no, I don't really trust it will change that much, but I do think their pie is going to shrink in the future. So there will be more and more smaller companies that eat up the market share, and at some point they will be obsolete.
Yeah, interesting. So if it were the world according to Adriaan, and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world, whether it's technology, human stuff, regulation?
I would say that every individual would be able to say where the data will end up and how, and they will be in the power of it. So I would say if you install an application, let's say you install TikTok, you should be able to say like, okay, I don't want to have my data being shared with anybody else. I don't want to have my data on servers in China, for example. I don't want to have my data being used for this and this and this, just for this. I think if at some point we will be there, or at least I hope. And I really think that that's one of the things in the ideal world where that will that would be my ideal world, where you can really say like the privacy belongs to the individual again.
Right. That's great. So how tell people how they can get to know you and your tool.
Yeah, so it's simpleanalytics.com, and we're active on Twitter, also on LinkedIn, and we have a nice newsletter. It's called the privacynewsletter.com, and that's it's quite nice because it shows a few tools every month, so you can kind of see what's changing in the landscape. We had some news articles and some new features that we launched in our tool. So I would highly recommend subscribing to that one. And you can always try out our tool. It's as easy as 2 weeks of a free trial, and just go to simpleanalytics.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This is great to have you on the show. I wish I was in Amsterdam right now, so I'm kind of jealous of you.
You're always welcome here. But to be fair, it's a bit gray and rainy. So
I'll take it. I just love it over there. It's so much fun. No one has to twist my arm to go to the Netherlands.
Well, let me know when you do. We'll do the coffee.
Oh, totally. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.